This is being recorded.
Recording in progress.
The meeting is being recorded. If anybody else is recording it in some way, shape, or fashion, please let us know as well. Okay, before we jump into the agenda, I just want to make some quick comments. Tonight's discussion, tonight's meeting will not entail mask mandates or masks or vaccinations. Those last two topics may come up in passing in some way, shape, or form, but the agenda tonight is not going to be discussing mask mandates. I apologize for the confusion. I think there were some people who thought that we would be talking about that tonight. We will not. The decision to remove it from the agenda was solely mine. If you're upset with somebody, I'm your guy. Feel free to be upset with me. It wasn't Joe, it wasn't the rest of the school committee members. As chair, I set the agenda, and I decided that tonight was not the correct forum for that. Some of you may say, well, why aren't we talking about it? There were a couple of different reasons. Excuse me. The first of which was, quite frankly, this was a moving target for us. As you all know, things changed drastically during the week. We went from it's going to be our call to, hey, there's definitely going to be a mandate coming down, to a mandate coming down, to them getting the wording. And those were all on separate days. So, discretion being the better part of valor, I thought, we need to actually kind of get a sense of what we're looking at here before we start talking about it. I realize that there are a lot of people who do want to discuss this. We fully intend to have a format for which you'll be able to do that. It will be in person because that seems to be a very big thing with people. Realistically and logistically, there was no way that we could speak confidently and clearly about this tonight, and we certainly could not switch up this meeting and make it a full in-person meeting for everybody who wanted to attend. It just logistically, it just wasn't going to happen. So I hope you guys understand why we did it. Again, if you're upset, you're well within your rights to be upset at me, nobody else. My call. I will say one thing, though. Frankly, I'm confused. I'm a little bit dumbfounded by the narrative I keep hearing about the school committee being unwilling to hear people's viewpoints. Quite frankly, in all my years on this committee, and certainly in this iteration of the committee, that has never been the case. In fact, I would actually say that we welcome other people's opinions. And in fact, at least in my own case, I've gone out and actively sought other people's opinions on topics that we're going to discuss. So while I understand a lot of the stuff that's going back and forth on social media, et cetera, I don't understand that. I don't know why anyone would think that we would not listen to the citizens of Norton. That is absolutely not something we've ever done in the past. It is not something we will be doing in the future. I can absolutely assure you of that. At this point, we are looking for a date to set up an open forum for people to come in person and let us know how they feel about this. It's not going to be a situation where we sit there and deliberate it and argue back and forth because, quite frankly, in the vast majority, this decision has been made for us. So that's where we stand. I'm going to move forward now with the agenda. And again, the topics may come up in passing tonight, but that is not going to be the focus of tonight's meeting. I hope you all understand that this decision was not made to subvert anybody's right to talk. It was actually made with the idea that this would give everybody the best possible forum to speak their minds. Thank you. Okay. First up on our agenda is the vote to approve the minutes of June 10th, 2021 open meeting. Has everybody had a chance to read those minutes?
Yes.
Okay, any objections, any corrections to it? No. Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from June 10th, 2021 open meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Dan Sheedy.
Yes.
Kathleen Stern.
Yes.
Cameron Gallagher.
Yes.
Debbie Cohen.
Yes.
And myself, yes. Unanimous. Okay, next up we have the warrants.
I'll start. I did warrants for June, so I'll start with that. I reviewed and approved the following warrants. School expense warrants, June 3rd, 2021, $341,608.90. June 17th, 2021, $173,990.04. And June 24th, 2021, $142,876.21. School payroll warrants, June 3rd, $1,130,997.22. June 17th, 2021, $4,951,874.85. I wish to enter this in the public record. And then Kathleen has to do the rest.
All right, I'm gonna I have reviewed and approved the following warrants. July 6th, $3,823,775. July 19th, $661,039.49. August 4th, $474,717.98. August 23rd, $292,282.49. Popular number, 49 cents. School payroll warrants, July 1st, $93,972.83. July 1st, I'm not sure why there's two, $89,343.75. July 15th, $12,986.17. July 15th, $171,818.45. July 29th, $222,178.64. July 12th, $223,756.95. I wish to put these in the record.
Done without objection. Great. Thank you very much to both of you. Next up on the agenda, we have student representatives update. We're actually not going to do that because they haven't, quite frankly, been in school since the last meeting. So there's not really much to update. I will say I appreciate you guys both being on to answer any questions that we have. That being said, if it's something you do have to help, hopefully understand. Okay, we do have some people raising their hand in the chat here. If you have a question, can you please actually put that in the Q&A section? If you put your question in there, we can read it and answer that here on live. Thank you. Okay, next up we have the review and vote on student handbooks. Who wants to start this one?
Hi, everyone. I can get this started. So just kind of checking in on format. We have the handbook in whole, as well as the memo, which sort of bullet points the key changes. So I thought I might go through that if that's preferable to everyone. Okay. Very good. So overall, again, the handbook has just kind of been redesigned and reformatted with the hope of making information easier to locate. Whenever it was directly relevant, we tried to put in key school committee policies that were not explicitly referenced before, which certainly doesn't mean that every school committee policy that is relevant to Norton High is included, but that did expand our handbook quite a bit. So that was just kind of the general reorganization and restructuring. Then taking things section by section. Under general information, just a few positions have been added. We now have our Dean of Students, who Jessie Shaughnessy, one of our teachers, will be joining us in that position. And we have added a guidance coordinator and actually another guidance position, which is still to be named. So we'll be adding that information. Some tweaks to the bell schedule. A working committee met over the summer that talked about changing not only the times, but the purpose of LLB, or shall I say, clarifying the purpose of it a little bit more. So in the general information section, we have the adjustment to the times. So now 4 days a cycle will be a 10-minute LLB, and then 3 days a cycle will be a longer 30-minute LLB. And a little bit later, I'll get into what it is we're going to use that time to do. And I'd pause there for a second. Any questions so far?
Amy, I do have a question on the LLB, but if you're going to explain it later, I'll wait to see if you answer my question.
Yes. Okay. All right. Then moving to academics, under the graduation requirements. So we have two, content areas there, both the academic requirements and the community service requirements. So under academics, we really just tried to tweak that a little bit to maximize flexibility for students. No changes to the total amount of credits required, but a little bit of relaxing of when students can earn their credits. The idea of needing to earn 7 majors in seven majors in senior year and pass 6 courses in in senior year is sometimes unnecessarily prescriptive. So again, the overall total remains the same, but just a little bit of flexibility as to when that can be earned. And then the community service graduation requirement, obviously we haven't had that the past couple of years. With all things COVID, we are looking to bring that back. And we would prorate hours for the graduating classes. And then as part of this proposal, we're actually looking to drop the total number of hours from 50 to 40. However, to build in more structure by saying that students need to complete 10 hours per year in order to be eligible to participate in certain student privileges. So that is something, by scaffolding it per year, we're hoping to make the experience a little more meaningful, help students to more successfully complete it. It's a structure I've seen work well in another school that I was part of. So that's part of where the inspiration for that came from. I know those are two big topics, so why don't I take pause again? Thoughts on those?
I just want to say I think that's a great idea. I'm not so sure about dropping the hours, but making them required every year, because as parent board, when I was on the parent board, I can't tell you how many seniors were coming up to me. I need to work every day of the week in college yard sale because I need 50 hours. So I think requiring it year per year is great. I'm not sure about dropping the hour, but that's up to everybody.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily loving dropping the hours either, quite frankly. But
Can I ask a question, Amy? The rhetoric, if I remember correctly, behind these hours is that we are now asking potential classes that haven't had availability to have to catch up with those original hours.
No, it's listed out as prorating. So the senior class of 2022 would, as part of this proposal, need to complete 10 hours, and then dropping from there, and then resuming the full hour requirement with the class of 2025.
Can I ask a question actually about the hours?
Yes.
So let's say that you had completed your hours already by, like, let's say sophomore year, you're done with your 50, 40 hours, whatever it is. Would you still need to additionally get 10 hours each year, or would you reset?
Not as it is written here. Again, kind of going off my past experience, some schools make a maximum that you cannot exceed. We did not build that in. We set it as a minimum. And actually, at the recommendation of our student rep on site council, Zoe Duran, I did put some language in as well about, if you have a plan, an explicit plan that you are going to earn, let's say, 20, 30 hours in a big chunk by participation in a special kind of experience. As long as you're communicating that with staff, we can work around those pieces. It's more so, again, making sure that students have some structure in place so that they're not, necessarily passing us a piece of paper at the end of the year saying, here's my 50 hours, and we really have no understanding or no meaning of where those came from, making it more part of their regular educational experience.
So I had a question as well. What kind of, is there any written guidelines as to what could be considered volunteering versus not volunteering? Because I've often struggled with, if someone is helping out a fundraiser for a booster club or something like that, like, to me, we write off some of that, but like, I would struggle that, you're raising money for a booster club to, donate or anything. So like, I have always taken exception to that. So is there any type of guidelines as to what is, acceptable versus not acceptable, or does it need like a prior approval, or can we, accept or reject something if it's submitted by a student?
As of yet, we don't have a lot of structure built into the requirement as a whole, which honestly, coming in new to Norton, a couple years ago, that was a struggle for me as well. I think if we're requiring something of our students, we kind of need to teach and provide them resources how to do it in a way that is meaningful. So as we continue to shape this educational experience, the community service piece, I would actually like to build more of that in, and this proposal is kind of a first step in that direction.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question as well? So I think that I would be in agreement that I'm not sure that I would want to decrease the number of hours, but I do wonder when you have your sort of freshman students who are 14 years old, 15 years old, is there any thoughts about potentially offering support or starting to build partnerships with programs? I'm not sure how easy it is always for a 14-year-old to get volunteer experience. I know, if they're like in a healthcare setting, for example, for my daughter who has graduated, she did 2 years in a pediatric hospital, but she wasn't able to do that until junior year. They're not taking a 14-year-old. So what exactly is going to sort of help, I guess, families acquire these? If students are required to do 10 hours a year, who's going to offer support in helping students find these volunteer experiences?
Yeah, so I think that would be kind of a two-pronged approach. On the one hand, if there was a student who knew I'm going to be participating in some kind of experience in my sophomore year, my junior year, where I am going to be able to successfully earn hours, but right now I have limitations based off of my schedule or my transportation, or maybe even what's going on with my family for some reason. I think we could make exceptions for things like that. Or on the other hand, if it was a matter of the student being unable to find service opportunities, that's something I'd really like to see us working through our guidance department and using our career specialists to kind of build up an inventory of opportunities that are available, and again, that were kind of pre-approved, that we had endorsed to some degree. So that is another resource to that end that I would like to see us do.
Better, do you mind if I interrupt just for 1 second to add to that? One of the things that we were looking to do prior to COVID was there's a new platform out there that will help communities, especially like ours that are small, who don't have a lot of public transportation, really don't have a lot of in the town kind of places for kids to go and volunteer. And they were just kind of starting up when COVID came around. So I've been in some discussions with them again. They're kind of ramping it up again to see if they can start to connect facilities, volunteer opportunities to local towns and schools, and sort of help us manage that. One of the other things they do is they have a platform where you can actually put those hours in, get it verified, instead of as many of us that are been in town and know the dreaded piece of volunteer paperwork that we all have to fill out and sign. So, and it goes beyond our boosters. Dan and I have had many discussions about the use of boosters as a community service, but given the amount of opportunities kids have, especially with those students who maybe don't have transportation or have some limitations about being able to connect up even with our assistance, I think that's one of the issues that we run into as a community, to be perfectly honest. And then I think the other piece is, so we now have a new community, a schools career specialist who has some expertise in this area. So we're hoping that we'll be able to utilize her in a different way than we have with our past person in that position.
Mr. Chairman.
You called me muted, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. To address a little bit of Ms. Gallagher's question, a couple of different things. Number one, we'll be coming to you in the fall with some connections to community in terms of moving in a direction, about 4 or 5 different directions that we're looking at, including Chapter 74 programming, which actually it requires that kids are job shadowing and all that stuff. What we currently do at Norton High School is, no blame of anyone, is fine. The problem is, if you want to do anything to do with a program that's going to enhance community service and or connection to the workplace, if you will, if you went that route with service hours, is you need somebody after school hours. You need somebody who can go see the student at their site, if you will, to make sure that if somebody's at the police department, for example, that the Norton Police Department has someone who is a direct contact can talk about the training or lack of training that the student has already had, and then we can make a connection within the school. So long term, having that type of position is in our plans. And that would include cooperative education, which is actually students going out into the workplace after school hours. That would include job shadowing of students. That would include potentially something like a police academy or a fire academy. We've been looking at, I have an email now to a number of the local big businesses who have received tips, asking them to join us in looking at job shadowing opportunities. We've met with the Tri-County, what's it called, the whatever it's called, board before COVID. We had sent them a letter saying that we wanted to organize this in a way that was easier for our students. We don't want students just knocking on the door and say, I'm here to do community service. Do you need any? That is a bad approach. And unfortunately, that's what's happening, or what's been happening for a number of years. The long-term goal is to make this more concise for students. And we're asking 700 students to go into a community of 19,000 people and predominantly a small business community. We need to expand beyond Norton with our community service hours if we're going to move, or we need to align ourselves with a slightly better, if you will. And I can ask Miss Albrighton to put together a small report of where the kids have been doing hours and how they've been doing those hours for either community service or also expanding beyond to actual shadowing and doing internships, if you will.
There's nothing further. I'll go on to the next point for now. Okay. So we actually removed a policy on exams with the understanding or the discussion with our academic coordinator group that any kind of exam or summative assessment would be consistent across the department, or at the very least a course section. So for example, honors biology. So we're kind of pivoting away from exams in all courses at the mid-year and the final point. Next piece, credit recovery and summer school. Just a change in the minimum requirements in favor of utilizing our student support team as kind of the governing board deciding credit recovery policies for students who are in need. Our student support team meets weekly and has a really good pulse on the students who are failing or who require other kinds of interventions throughout the year. So utilizing their expertise in terms of making decisions on how folks should continue on with their credit recovery plans. And then the last piece in the academic section also kind of falls to our student support team, the idea of introducing alternative grades. And really those would be a solution in rare cases where we may have a student with a long-term absence due to a medical or mental health issue or something of the like, to provide a different option rather than a precisely calculated numeric grade for a term when they might have experienced a long-term absence. So that is our academic section. Okay. Moving on to student services, like we said, we talked about the increase in time for LLB for certain days out of the cycle, and fully articulated in the handbook is kind of a statement of purpose, learning objectives for how we would use that time, from everything really as an intervention block for some of our struggling students to a time to increase sense of belonging for our student community. That's one of our major goals for the school this year. We have some survey data that shows that we have gaps in that area. So we really want to use that time to build strong relationships between students and our teachers and our school as a whole. And then also just using that as a vehicle to articulate our portrait of a graduate outcomes. Something that we have listed as learning priorities, but we would like to increase the way that we deliver them to students, really modeling them and explicitly teaching them in LLB.
So those are all fine objectives, and we think we'll accomplish that in 10 minutes.
So no, that's why some of the blocks are lengthened to the 30-minute time frame. So on the 10-minute blocks, we're really just looking at a check-in and daily announcements. And then we have a working committee that's going to continue to convene throughout the year to discuss how to use those longer blocks and do some mini lessons around the student outcomes we listed.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Malia.
What about kids who use that time to go to like extra help if they can't, get rides after school and like need to make up work and stuff like that? Like in those 10-minute blocks, if those 30-minute blocks are being used for like wider like school like bonding stuff like that, when would the time be for kids to still be able to do that?
So the issue of time that we talked about within the committee, just to sort of clarify what this was, is we had a 22-minute block as we returned out of our COVID scheduling here, which seemed to fall really kind of in a netherworld of not being quite enough time to get really into depth on getting any type of real well-structured extra help, and then maybe a little bit too long just to have a little bit of a check-in. So that would be one of the purposes of the longer blocks, with some of this sort of coaching about self-advocacy in order to set up appointments to see teachers where you'd have a much more substantive time to get extra help, potentially make up a quiz, something along those lines. And as Mrs. Benner described, sort of working on these portrait of a graduate skills, that would be a big part of it. Is short blocks would be an opportunity to check in with your LB teacher, take a look at your academic progress. Maybe we've talked about sort of trying to routinize these things by days of the cycle, so that you look at your school brains on one day, you'd think about what appointments you need to make, and then the next day on that 30-minute block, you'd have the opportunity to see those teachers in a larger and more substantive way. So the idea being is that 22 minutes was not quite the right amount of time for either of those two things. So by blending them, we keep the same amount of time in class, but then have those particular days ready for students to go and access those supports that they need.
My concern with the thing of them only being like a couple days of 30 minutes though is now you kind of run into the issue with all of the students are trying to make appointments on the same day, and I don't know if teachers would be able to handle like going through all those appointments and giving the kids the help they need. Does that make sense? Like I feel like
I think we might have seen a little more difficulty with students having access to teachers last year. The lack of the late bus really hit us hard. So the students who didn't have a transportation option really needed to only use LLB time as a way to connect with their teacher. So now that we don't have that barrier, I think we'll have a little more flexibility with access to teachers now that they're able to stay after school. We don't have kind of a build-in close time, and transportation will be in full swing.
But to your point too, Malia, I mean, this is something that we're trying. We think that the structure was not quite serving our needs as it was when we were going back to our 22 minutes, and this was something that we'll see. If it ends up that there are really crowded times for teachers, then we can kind of adjust what we're doing in order to try to accommodate that. But the idea here was again to try to systematize it so that there were specific opportunities that you could seek that substantive extra help.
thank you, just curious.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking.
I like how you put the Lancer Learning Block goals and you put it right to the portrait of a graduate, supporting why we're doing it and how we're doing it and what the outcome is supposed to be for it. That was a great job.
Thank you. So then nothing changed in extracurricular services, activities. For attendance, we're reverting, to our pre-COVID policies. So that will be sort of a return to normal in that respect anyways. Then under the behavior section, this is another piece that was guided by committee work, a lot of input from our faculty on this, and the experts in our district who kind of have better experience with behavior remediation. So we created a tiered system in response to behaviors. And this will also be a precursor to this year. The high school is going to be onboarding with PBIS, for those of you who are familiar with that system. So really trying to kind of look at different kinds of interventions for different levels of behavior, and then also wherever possible building in positive reinforcement of behaviors. We're looking at, we really want to hear from the student group about not just the consequences we can offer when a student makes a negative behavior choice, but the kinds of privileges we can offer for those students who are making the right choices. Then adding, we did start playing around with in-school suspension last year. It's not something that is structured to the degree that we would like, but when possible, we have used it as an alternative to out-of-school suspension, which is preferable. I had already touched on the student privileges and PBIS point, jumping ahead a little bit. And then the last bullet under behavior, we added a section on photographing, video recording, and security cameras. We have had a couple incidences where students photographing or videoing others has become problematic in student conflict. So that was stated a little more explicitly. Pause again. Also, excuse my flush. My office is about 90 degrees right now, so bear with me. Okay. So just coming down the end, no changes made under miscellaneous or governing laws other than just the addition of a lot of links there to cross-reference our policies. And that in totality is our 21-22 student handbook.
I just might add, this is actually sort of the culmination of a couple of years. We sort of started this process back in February of 2020, looking at it through our site council, and then sort of with our reopening plan, that was sort of something that superseded our student handbook with the different COVID protocols that were in that. So this is sort of a revisitation and kind of represents quite a bit of thinking over the past couple of years through our site council process. And as Mrs. Benner talked about, some of the committee work that we've done over this summer and over the course of the past couple of years and get some input. One thing that I'll also mention, just that is not really stated here in the policy, but something that we've talked quite a bit about in our site council, is partnering with our student council this year to try to create a student government body that will have kind of consistent input on the student handbook and actually be a place where some policy changes can be generated by students and sort of make their way through a process to then be added to the handbook. Something that would be kind of more of a permanent student government kind of legislative council. We approached I think both of our student council reps or both of our school committee reps are on the student council. We talked a little bit about something like a Norton High School constitution that would actually provide this means of having students have impact on the actual policies that are set. And working through the current student government to do that. So just something to, again, kind of continue to develop the student handbook as a real living document that represents our values and where we're going as a school.
Can we answer anything else?
Mr. Chairman, it does require a vote as it is a handbook.
Okay, do you want to vote on them separately? The middle school, the elementary school as well?
Yes, you have the elementary and then you have this one as a high school. The middle school has already been completed.
Okay, so we're voting separately on the two?
Yes.
Okay.
Dinesh, before we go, can I just ask, does it have to, I think some of us had sort of a question about the hours, the amount of hours. Do we vote it as is, or is there a potential conversation just to consider the amount of volunteer hours? Is that something?
The committee can make any changes it chooses to a student handbook unless it violates the law, which in this case it does.
I don't know if anybody else feels, I personally, I guess in my mind, have always thought 50 seemed, we're asking our students in Norton to really sort of be good citizens. So I don't necessarily disagree with the change of asking students to complete hours yearly. I just wonder the reasoning behind the sort of shift from 50 down to 40.
Yeah, I would tend to say the same. I would prefer to stick with 50. That being said, I'll say what I always say, it's not the hill I'm gonna die on. So if other people feel the same way with the 50, then that's fine. If there's not an overwhelming majority for that, then I'm fine with 40 as well.
Well, as Carolyn said, it's harder for the younger kids maybe to get these hours in. So maybe as a freshman and a sophomore to get your feet wet, you have to do 10 hours. But then I don't think it's unreasonable to ask for 15 hours for a junior and a senior.
I agree, Kathleen. I think that makes sense.
So the recommendation would be, or the motion would be to approve the handbook with an amendment of the community service hours of 10, 10, 15, 15 for a total of 50.
Dan, do you want to weigh in on it?
Yeah, I was kind of contemplating how I would, have this decision, but, I don't see a reason why it can't be 40. I would like it to be 50, but I think, in my comment earlier, I think we need more substance to it. And that's kind of where I'm coming from. The hours aren't the bigger part for me. I believe more in the substance. So I would have no problem doing 10, 10, 15, 15 as proposed. I'd have no problem with 40. I have no problem with 50, but I really want us to take a look as a district about the content.
And actually, I think that was the prevailing, belief behind lowering it to 40 was kind of manageable meant meaningful. And that was the idea that with a little bit less time, it would be something that students could do and design a little bit more meaningful processes. But again, we certainly are fine with 10, 10, 15, 15 as well. We can make that adjustment easily.
And the part I would add is just, I don't think we have enough information to say that the 50 hours have been completed meaningfully by our student body. I worry about that. And we are a community that has far fewer resources than some other communities that have our requirements of this nature. So to me, it seems more fair kind of thinking about those two pieces of the decision and the requirement for our students.
Do you think by breaking it up year by year, it might make it a little easier to manage to make sure that the content is a quality content as opposed to, 187 kids at the end of the year giving you 50 hours? Because I'm sure that that's majority of what happens.
Exactly, and we don't have any structure. Johnny can give us a verification form saying that they mowed a lawn for 50 hours for their neighbor, and right now we don't have a structure to say whether they did or didn't, and whether or not we think that was a meaningful experience for them. And I'm sure that there are a number of students who go above and beyond on the hour requirements, who 50 is the low bar for our high achievers. But to think about across our full student body, how we can scaffold it again in a way that they're regularly engaging in experiences that have a learning outcome.
In addition to that, it's obviously very early stages here. We are going to have a civics project requirement that's coming into our social studies department. There's a plan in order to deal with that, but part of that could be also sort of melded with our community service requirement, because that's part of it is sort of having some of that civic engagement. So that's something that could come about with this, to Mr. Sheedy's point of just sort of making it a little bit more meaningful and having a learning outcome, as there are going to be more, I think, opportunities to kind of meld it with the curriculum.
All right, so how do you want to proceed on this?
I think I'm like you, Janez. I'm not certainly. I think, Amy, you sort of explained it really nicely, that 40 hours is obtainable in a community where we don't have sort of the luxury of a lot of options. So I see both sides of the perspective. I really do understand that. And I do know how difficult it is for many students to get the 50 and are struggling to just do whatever. So, as you said, Janez, I'm not necessarily willing to kind of fight for 50. I just always thought that as a community, we just really strengthened that model with our students, that we're a community and we support one another. So, but I don't know if anybody else is really.
So it doesn't sound like we're fighting for 50, right? Because it sounds like there's multiple people who feel the same way. Unless Amy, you have a strong objection to 50, I think we're kind of looking at the same way at this point. Amy?
I think I would like to go to 40 with an understanding that there is a commitment to make this structured and meaningful for all students.
Okay, are people okay with that?
Yeah, I think that quality over quantity, you know, when you explain it that way, I'm fine with the 40.
Okay.
It's a good point.
Exactly, Sherry, I agree. It's the quality. So,
So,
Mr. Chairman, one of the things we can do is that we can have Ms. Benner, who's been really leading this effort, maybe report back to the committee after the first of the year to kind of take a look at what is happening with the students, how it's becoming more structured, how it's already being more, excuse me, how it's being more supportive of students as well. Maybe Amy, we could come back, let's say for the February or March school committee with an update on what it looks like and maybe other ideas that have come up since then.
Yeah, and maybe in a community where we're just coming out of or in the middle of still COVID, it's probably a better idea to keep it at 40, but I do want to see that we're making them more meaningful and maybe in the future increase them back up, you know, once the kids are able to go out and do a lot more.
okay. Is there any other discussion on any other parts of the handbook? No? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to accept the changes to the handbook as written.
Thank you.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
I would make a point that this is for the high school.
yes,
handbook.
high school handbook. We don't need to re-motion, do we?
The motion is made by, to accept the Norton High School handbook by Ms. Cohen, seconded by Ms. Gallagher is what I heard. I don't know if I missed it.
Yes.
Motion. Kathleen Stern,
Yes.
Caroline Gallagher,
yes.
Dan Sheedy,
Yes.
Betty Cohen,
Yes.
and Denise Savas, yes. Okay, next up, we're going to do the elementary handbook.
That would be Dr. Marcus.
Thank you, Dr. Bowder. Good evening, everybody. This is Dr. Marcus, and pleased to be here. The elementary handbook is mostly just some name changes and some grammatical updates. There really weren't too many changes that we made in going through the handbook with my colleagues, Mrs. Luke and Mr. Gagan. We mostly just went through and changed some of the names that have been updated over the last year. And then gone through the handbook and made it was a good opportunity for me as the new guy to be able to kind of ask them, you know, what is this? What is this? And had some good discussion about those kinds of things. So what you'll see in the elementary handbook, mostly the first 5 pages are just name changes for new folks that have come on board. There was a good question sort of offline the other day about buses and the idea of what a bus pass was, and so we updated the language on page 6 about bus changes, basically to take out the confusing notion of what a bus pass was, which was something the same terminology used for the kind of temporary 1 day at a time kind of a thing. And changed it and embedded it just back in the same paragraph. So it now just says that bus changes from on a day-to-day kind of a thing aren't allowed. Page 6 also had some word choice items, just changing to the word guidelines instead of timeline, and so on down the line. I don't know if you saw those. Everything else from there on in is basically just some slight grammatical changes or those kinds of things. And then from page 13 on was really left completely the same as it was in the past, as those are pretty much just policies that look like they were the same. So happy to take any questions or any comments on the elementary handbook.
I have a broader question, I guess, on handbooks in general. So in this handbook, we have we do, and I apologize for bringing this up, but we do have a masking policy. We do not have one in the high school handbook.
Yeah, the policy is being added.
Okay,
So your policy, all district policies that are involved, anything to do with disciplinary action, civil rights, and so on and so forth, will be embedded into all handbooks for the coming school year, which has not necessarily been a practice in the past.
okay,
So our handbooks are going to look longer because of that.
of course. Okay, any questions on this?
So we have some district-wide policies versus related to just elementary, high school, and middle school.
Right, exactly. So an example might be, for example, your policies are predominantly written as pre-K through 12 policies because you run a pre-K through 12 district. So if you go on our school committee page of the district page, and you go to the policy section and you click on policy, all of our policies, which you guys know were updated 2 years ago over a 3-year period, all align to MASC, and any changes that have been made since then, i.e. last year's mask policy, are all still embedded in there until a process of change takes place. Or you're giving a policy as a recommendation, and then you can decide yes or no on it. As an example, for example, a few years ago, you might recall that we had Norton policies all over the place. And those policies actually did not align to state policy recommendations. And that's why we went through that 3-year process of, as myself, Jen O'Neill, all the different administrators, and your representative was Kathleen Stern, if I remember correctly.
Okay, thank you.
So now we vote on it?
Any other comments? Any other questions? No? Okay, I would entertain a motion to accept the elementary family handbook as written.
So moved.
So moved.
Second,
Second,
all those in favor, Kathleen Stern,
yes.
Kevin Gallagher,
Yes.
Ian Sheedy,
Yes.
Debbie Cohen,
Yes.
and Denise Savas, yes.
Can I clarify something that's causing some questions? Policies and procedures are two different things. The school committee controls and votes on policies. The school system oversees the procedures for the process. So an example would be if a student is being expelled, you have a policy process, but you also have a procedural process. Procedures go into handbooks, policies are in a policy manual. However, in recent years, because of the anti-bullying state policy that came down legislatively, we began the process of adding policies that have a direct impact into our student handbooks. So for those folks questioning, for example, the mask policy, that mask policy was voted in August of 2020 and currently is still there until further notice. And you also received a top-down decision from the state on that issue. And you have one issue in there to address under the realm of early childhood, which you, I believe, in talking to the chairman today, will be taken up at a meeting the first week of school.
Okay, we've already got through, so we're good there. Update on return to school. Dr. Bauer, I assume that's you.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much, and welcome to all that are on tonight. Let me first just give you some general updates of the hiring process. You'll get the opportunity to get all the names and information, probably your first school committee meeting or the second, as we are still currently filling 2 positions within the district. I want to thank Ms. Alves and Mr. Liberatore for their work with the mentees this past week, as well as a number of administrators that were involved in putting together the 3 days that those folks have been working diligently to get to know our culture. I met them today. Many of them I'd already met, but today I got to meet them in actual person. Next week, we will publish all protocols for COVID to all families, and it would also be published online. We are cutting and pasting all requirements from DESE, any of our local quote requirements, policies, so on and so forth. Those will be available to everybody to review next week. We did the same thing, if you remember last year when we came back during COVID. This year we have a number of changes. As you know, the DESE requirements have come down. Those requirements, it's my understanding for a phone call today, will be reviewed prior to October 1st, based on the current mandates from the state. How soon to that, I don't know, but I'm informing the committee tonight that your school committee meeting for late September, early October, we may have to add some more meetings depending on what comes from the state. The COVID website on the district website will be activated on the 7th of September, and daily thereafter at 3 p.m. as we did before. There will be a weekly update from my office, not only on COVID, but all other important matters. I'm hoping this year that we actually can talk about teaching and learning in those newsletters that are going out on a weekly basis from my office. And then lastly, and as important, or most important, is I in all the years that I've been in Norton, I just wanted the committee to know that I've never seen more of our staff back in the building in the now 9 years that I've been here. Our schools have been packed with staff all week, just getting their rooms ready. You can feel the excitement in the air. To be quite honest, people happy to see each other, people engaged with each other. Folks learning from each other. There were a bunch of folks in my conference room today, the interventionist folks working on teaming and having a team plan to make sure that on day one, when students come in, we're ready to go. So those are all the positive things that have been happening in our preparation. We walked the building today, myself and the director of facilities, Gabe Lazard, with the head custodians of the schools, and got to really see the work that's gone into the schools this year, a tremendous amount. As you know, Train has been working on the heating system over at and boiler over at the Yell. I'll give you a report on that as an update as well once the school year starts and we really move in that direction of not having those folks in the building because we're back to teaching and learning. And then the last part that I wanted to make sure everyone was on hand is that in the near future, it came up earlier today when discussing Lancer Learning Time about our Portrait of a Graduate. And one of the things we really want to do is tie in our Portrait of a Graduate kindergarten through 12th grade and not just a high school thing. The Portrait of a Graduate is literally a portrait of what a graduate of Norton High School should come out with. That starts with the first day that our students come into the district, really, as a student. So just wanted to provide you with some of those updates. And then lastly, again, there's been a number of folks commenting on policy. Policies that are in place are on our district website under school committee. You can actually go to the site, you can tab policy, top right-hand corner, the general topic, and that'll come up as the actual policy for the district. It notes the general laws it's attached to, the mandates, the links, and it also notes the dates that it was voted and or updated. All of those are available on site. They do not have to be revoted on a year-to-year basis. They're voted on as changes come up. Thank you.
Okay, next up we have review and vote on the addition of 2 early release days to the 2021-2022 school calendar.
I'll turn it over to Ms. O'Neill.
Thank you so much. So tonight we are proposing to add 2 half-days to our calendar. The reason for that is that throughout the year, it's really, really important to give our staff time to work together, to collaborate, to plan for student interventions, look at student data. So therefore, we are recommending that we add a early release date to the Friday before February break, which is Friday, February 18th, as well as an early release date of Friday before April vacation, which will be Friday, April 15th. These are days where we have a lot of staff on hand, and that families could necessarily start their vacation a little bit early with that half day, and give us some nice time to work with our staff and do continuous development throughout the course of the year. Any questions or concerns?
Any questions on that? No. Seeing none, we are voting, okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve those 2 additional early release dates.
So moved.
Second,
All those in favor, Kathleen Stern,
Yes.
Ellen Gallagher,
Yes.
Daniel Sheedy,
Yes.
Debbie Connor,
yes.
and Dinesh Savas is a yes. Okay, sorry, say again? It's another.
Just a thank you.
Next up, we have the Massachusetts Council for the Social Studies Award.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee and the community at large, I'd like to this evening from a June 21st information that I received from the Massachusetts Council for the Social Studies. Our Social Studies Department at Norton High School has been awarded the recognition of department and team excellence in teaching social studies. Congratulations to the academic coordinator for social studies, Mark Liberatore, who I believe is on tonight, Ms. Beck, Ms. Grasso, Mr. Green, Ms. Jenkins, Mr. McCoy, Mr. Paulus, and yes, Mr. Shaughnessy, who's coming over to be the dean, but was part of that department at the time. Congratulations to them all. They're a fantastic group. I think many of you know that a lot of the students really connect with the social studies department with all of the different, especially electives and opportunities that they provide. And I just want to thank each of them for their work with our student body and Mark for his leadership of the department. Thank you. Congratulations. They will be recognized at an upcoming celebration.
Excellent. Congratulations to all of them. And that brings us to the end of the agenda. Do we have any other unanticipated business? Joe? No? Okay, I'm gonna reiterate because we keep getting stuff in the chat about this. There are questions about why don't we allow an additional agenda item, et cetera, for the questions on mandates. And we're giving you an entire separate meeting to discuss this. We're gonna let you be heard. We want you to be heard in person, which was a huge deal for a lot of people to be heard in person. So we are in fact scheduling another meeting. I believe at this point, we're talking about the 8th of September. Joe, you and I talked about that.
In order for you folks to get a quorum, you need to wait until the 8th of September. That's the way it came up as the phone calls about who's available.
Right. So what Joe's talking about is when I tried to get this earlier, we just simply couldn't get everybody in the same room at the same time. And in fairness to all the school committee members and administration, we got to have everybody there to hear everybody's comments. Because if something comes up, if we do have to have a vote on this after that, we don't want to have it on somebody not having heard what people say. So I understand people's anger. I understand their fury. Again, be mad with me. I'm okay with it. I'm used to it. My wife gets mad at me all the time. That being said, we are trying our best to accommodate you and allow you to speak your mind. Trust me, you will be heard. I assure you. It just doesn't make sense to do it tonight because, quite frankly, we're already past 6, 7 o'clock now, and I'm betting that open forum is going to take hours and hours. So we'll give you a forum to talk, both sides, and it will be a respectful, open discussion. And if something comes up from that and there needs to be some changes, the school committee will take that into advisement and we will move forward with that. I hope you understand why I didn't allow an open mic night tonight. It just was not the right format, quite frankly. You will be heard. Okay.
Can I just say something real quick? I'm seeing some of the comments come in, and I have to just be honest, because I always am. It's really a little bit upsetting, right? We are not the enemy. We're parents just like you who are commenting, who have questions. We are navigating once again through all of this. We really thought at this point in time we wouldn't be having these discussions anymore, but yet here we are on our summer night, having a meeting when typically we have summers off. Did not have last summer off. We're here. We're trying to navigate through new mandates, which were taken out of our hands. We didn't have the ability to vote, and people do not know how we were going to vote. So please just remember coming up to a forum that we are not the enemy. We really are trying to work with our, fellow parents in this town for the best of our children. I really don't want to see Norton start turning on each other. We're a community that comes together in times like this. And I just really feel like, it's just not headed that way. And I'm really just asking everybody to just take a step back, take a deep breath, and just remember to be a little bit kind to, people who may be sitting in the seat volunteering, trying to navigate these waters and keep everybody safe and move forward out of this COVID. I'm just asking you to please remember that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Any other business to be brought before the board? No. Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to dismiss.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
The first motion took a while. I thought people were doing Kathleen Stern,
Yes.
Cameron Gallagher,
Yes.
Dale Sheedy,
Yes.
Debbie Cohen,
Yes.
Dennis Doss. Yes. Okay, thank you, everybody.